Alrighty, so the recording has begun. If you benefit from the transcript or from closed captions, that means you should be able to turn it on at this time. And we are going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Here, so welcome to our quarterly subrecipient meeting, as I said, for January of 2025. We're so excited to see you all here today. I'm going to do my very best to monitor the chat during our time today. I've got two windows pulled up here. And we'll also just flag that we expect to have a healthy crowd join us today. So I might be doing a bit of managing between multiple screens here today as well. So as always, we want to start by thanking our many partners who are joining us on the call today. We have a tiny but mighty team from the Grants Management Unit, which we'll look at together later today. And then we're also joined by a number of our NDE colleagues throughout our programmatic offices, and we're always grateful for the work that we get to partner with our programmatic offices and our directors from our other offices throughout the department. So thank you to each and every one of you. To my entire team, we've had a number of people join our team since our last quarterly subrecipient meeting, and so this will be a first for many of them. We are happy to announce that we are fully staffed for the first time in, well, maybe ever since I took this role. I think we've had brief moments of full staffing and various times, but we're happy to have a healthy crew in the Grants Management Unit for the first time in a long time, as I said. All right, so here's a quick overview of thanks, Pam, of our agenda today. We're going to start off with a good overview of what many of you, I'm sure, have joined us today. There are 180 people on the call already, and I'm certain that that's maybe small part in due to the memo that was released by the Office of Management and Budget regarding the pause on federal financial assistance. So we're going to do a good dive into that and talk about some of the facts that we know at this point, what the department did yesterday, what we're doing today, to make sure that we're staying abreast of all that information. We'll have an opportunity to talk about, answer the questions you may have as we know it, as we're able to answer those today. We also had a handful of questions that were submitted via the agenda item survey request, so we'll be talking about those and answering those. We're going to look at the FY26 Master Grants timeline that I sent out on Monday night and attached to the meeting invite for today. And then we're also going to look at the FY25 budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource. We have a couple of reminders about requests for reimbursement deadlines, and then we'll talk about future office hour topics. So without further ado, the purpose of the quarterly subrecipient meetings is to provide a, let's see.
Plugged in.
I'm going to mute you, Paula. The purpose of the quarterly subrecipient meetings is to provide an opportunity for all of us to come together on a quarterly basis where we can answer any questions, provide updates as a department to all of you, our subrecipient partners, and also to collect information from you in terms of what you need from us. So about 3 weeks before these meetings, I send out an agenda item survey via a link or a QR code that you can complete via a Microsoft Forms survey. And then we take that information into consideration and try to provide answers to those during the meeting. And then we also bring forward relevant and pertinent information updates to all of you, depending on where we're at in the fiscal and grant funding cycle. And to remind you about any changes or updates that you may need to know and have on your radar screen as we're moving forward. This is not content specific per se. We do those in months 2 and 3 of the quarter. where we might talk about something more specifics. And at the very end of our time together today, we have a list of the topics, the office hour topics that we've covered in previous office hour sessions in those second and third months of the quarter. But these quarterly subrecipients are more broad, meant to support our subrecipient partners. We invite our colleagues from throughout the Department of Education as well to listen in, so that if there's any information updates that would be useful or helpful to them as well, that we're all operating from the same base set of information and instructions. We've structured and prepared content. Obviously, we will be providing copies of the slides after the meeting, so that'll come out via email to the same email that I sent the Master Grants timeline and the FY25 budget preparation guidelines and chart of account supplemental resource on Monday night. I will also attach the slide deck to the meeting invite, so you should be able to access those materials via multiple methods. We do have slides built in throughout, though, where we will have discussion breaks so that we can revisit any of the slides, the information we had just covered. You can also use the chat, as I see people are already doing this morning. And so we will, you can use the raise hand, the chat function, and then once we get to those discussion points, you're welcome to take yourself off of mute and to ask those questions or have that discussion in real time. So I will give a quick overview of the memo, although it looks like the order was just rescinded. So what I think will be helpful is that we can, and I haven't had a chance, of course, everything we're doing these days is in real time. And so we haven't had a chance. Thank you to Betsy for dropping that information in the chat. We'll give you an update on that once we've been able to get that from our sources as well. But I did want to provide a review of where we are at this point in time. So on January 27th, the Office of Management and Budget, which is an office within the Executive Office of the President of the United States, issued an order, a memorandum known as M25 for the calendar year 2513, which directed heads of executive departments and agencies, which applies to the federal government. And the subject of that memo was temporary pause of agency grant, loan, and other financial assistance programs. And here's some, whenever I'm quoting that memo, it's in italics. And that memo required federal agencies to identify and review all federal financial assistance programs and supporting activities consistent with the president's policies and requirements. And there were two key footnotes in that statement. And the footnote number one referenced the federal definition of federal financial assistance that's located in 2 CFR, so the Code of Federal Regulations, 2 subpart 200, and paragraphs 1 and 2 of 200.1, and further included that assistance received or administered by recipients or subrecipients of any type was included in that definition of federal financial assistance. And then it further stated that the term did not include assistance provided directly to individuals. And then footnote 2 stated that the OMB memo M2513 did not impact Medicare or Social Security benefits. In general, the memo did not include direct individual. Yes, we got that, Diane. Thank you. Individual payments and subsidies. And so then the memo did go on to provide examples of executive orders and required federal agencies to complete a comprehensive review, and then further directed those agencies to pause all activities, including activities that were associated with NOFOs. And that pause was supposed to become effective at 5 p.m. Eastern yesterday, 2 o'clock for those of us on Pacific time. And then the agencies were directed to submit information to the Office of Management and Budget, reviewing the federal financial assistance that they provided, and then the OMB actually put out a 52-page document last night with a list of those federal financial assistance, 2,600 of them that were supposed to be included in that. So here's the copies of the memos if you haven't seen them. Just for your benefit, I do think it's helpful for you to know that we took immediate action. So we became aware of the memo late Monday night. We took action first thing Tuesday. Superintendent uh, Joan Ebert and Deputy Superintendent Peterson met with superintendents of school districts. Superintendent Peterson and I met with the CFOs of school districts and SBCSA. Our colleagues in our Office of Fiscal Operations and Grants Management Unit staff started doing an inventory of any outstanding requests for reimbursement that we hadn't paid out, any invoices off contracts and NDE payables that would include payroll and other costs that we incur as a department under the administrative portions of those federal financial assistance or grants that we are recipients of through various federal agencies. And then we continued throughout. So that was our immediate action to make sure that we were best positioned to submit a pre-draw before those cutoffs happened at 2 o'clock our time. And so we started that work, boots on the ground first thing yesterday morning. And then throughout the day, Superintendent Ebert and Deputy Peterson continued to coordinate and communicate with the Office of the Governor, the Attorney General's office here in Nevada, the state treasurer, and other key state agencies throughout the day to make sure that we were all coordinated and we all knew what we were doing in terms of timing and process. One of the things that you all may not know is that we also operate on a reimbursement basis. And so the same process that you all go through in submitting your request for reimbursement to us for your subaward agreements, we go through with the federal government. And so we don't receive a lump sum of cash at the beginning of the federal fiscal year to say, here's your millions or billions of dollars, and you can just use it whenever or however you want to. We go through the exact same process that all of you do, so that once we've paid out all of you as our subrecipient partners through the subawards, once we've paid out our NDE payables or our various invoices off some of the contracts or interlocal agreements we may have. So those costs, the subaward portion of our federal grants is only a portion. It's usually the largest portion of our federal financial assistance that we manage, but it's not the entire bit of it. And so we have the costs that support many of the staff in the department. We have the costs that support many of the operating costs of the department, the entire Office of Fiscal Operations, most of our grants analysts within the grants management unit, and some of the contracts that we run under federal financial assistance. And so we had to do an inventory of all those costs that we had not already submitted to the various federal systems for reimbursement. And so we did that immediately so that we were best positioned to do a pre-draw, which we are allowed to do in exigent circumstances such as these, and so that we could get those submitted before the 2 p.m. cutoff. But in order to do that, it's not as simple. Just like with you guys, you get frustrated with us when you submit something in ePage and it has to go through multiple levels of review and approval, and many people have to push buttons to make it go through. The same thing happens with us at the state level, where we will submit that request and then it goes through the controller's office and various other systems and processes within our state systems before it ever makes it to the federal system. And we also experienced recently in December an upgrade to our financial payment processing system with the state. And as many technical system, IT system upgrades go, the rollout has had hiccups and wrinkles, as we expected that it would, and some additional steps that were introduced in the process of us submitting draws. And so that has been challenging already for us as we are learning and identifying those wrinkles as we've been doing them. And then this, of course, sort of put all of those stressors on hyper speed and hyper mode yesterday. So we rallied as a group. We had everything that we needed. We had all the tools that we needed here within the department, and we were able to successfully submit many pre-draws before the 2 p.m. cutoff. There were a number of the systems as we were submitting ASAP requests that were sending error codes, which were sending panics throughout the country as well, different systems, depending on the federal assistance and the federal agency that was managing that program. So it was a fun and hectic and chaotic day, but I want you to know that we were well positioned and we were ready to respond with the team that we had. And I'm immensely grateful for the leadership of Superintendent Ebert and for Deputy Peterson and her leadership for the way that our teams in our Office of Fiscal Operations and in our grants management unit really rallied and dug in for the immediate cooperation and grace and patience that our district superintendents and our CFOs, all of you as our subrecipient partners, as you reached out for information, for the trust that you put in us to know that we would handle this appropriately, and we did. And we, as I said, we were able to manage that. And then in the middle of that, we received an update from USAID, a brief one that clarified for us that the pause was not going to apply to formula grants. It would only the pause would only apply to discretionary funds. So we were able to shift priority a little bit to focus on those priority funds. But we still proceeded as if we weren't sure completely on the process. We figure it's better to hedge our bets and make sure that we're ready to go. So again, at the time, this was the information we were operating off of. And then later in the day, District Court in the District of Columbia and DC placed an administrative stay, which I believe is what prompted the action that you just saw a few minutes ago, where there was a stay placed and a temporary injunction on the order until a hearing that was scheduled for February 3rd, where the defendants in the case of the first lawsuit was Office of Management and Budget and the acting director of that office. They had 2 days to respond to the complaint of the plaintiffs, and then the plaintiffs would have had another day to respond to that, and then a hearing was scheduled. There was also a second lawsuit that was filed by 22 attorneys general, including the state of Nevada in that. There were a number of defendants named in that case. 11 federal agencies and their acting directors, including the and then also the Office of Management and Budget, that acting director, as well as the President Trump. There's some information that OMB had provided on what they call a fact sheet website on their OMB website. And they also issued late last night some instructions to federal agencies, which it appears that may all be moot at this point. And we'll continue to apprise you of those developments. As I said, they are happening in real time. And I hope what you're taking away from these slides is that we are doing a very good job of keeping our finger on the pulse of what's happening. We've got great contacts and networks between Superintendent Ebert and her relationships, both with state leadership at the governor's office and other constitutional officers and other elected officials within the legislature and at the federal level. And that we've got the capacity and the expertise here within the department to manage these types of situations, and that we are always going to do our very best effort and our due diligence to make sure that your interests and your ability to continue to do the work that you need to do is supported as best as we can. And so we will continue to share information that is relevant and pertinent as it becomes available, although we can't do that in real time as soon as we have published, as soon as I've opened a meeting. So we'll get you the information that we have regarding if that memo has been rescinded just as soon as we have it. And Deanna, in response to your question, if the memo's been rescinded, then it appears that the 14 discretionary federal grants that we did identify, that's probably a moot point at this point. But like I said, we'll continue to monitor the situation, and as that information is available, we'll provide updates. And if it, you bet, and if it is, if that were to shift or change at all, we will absolutely provide you with the best information we have as soon as we know that it is verified and that it is valid. Do not want to contribute to any of the chaos that we are already swimming in. scroll up just a little bit past all the AI note takers. All right. With that, I want to thanks everybody for all of the links. You all know, you've heard me say I am not an accountant. I'm a social worker. A social worker who studied high school math and science in my bachelor's degree, but never taught. I started having babies 4 weeks after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I was very fortunate to be able to stay home and raise those kids until they were until they were launched, and then I was able to go back to school and get a master's in social work. And I've had the opportunity because of that master's degree to study trauma and stress and how the body reacts to that. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes to share some of that information from a different hat that I have worn professionally. And then we'll open it up for some discussion and questions. But I want you to know that the body is structured to respond to stress in a way that supports survival. And from a biological perspective, we would say that's adaptive. It means that we had an adaptation that supported survival. Sometimes we talk about pinkies and eyebrows and all the ways that our human body has evolved and adapted to support human survival. And a stress response is absolutely an adaptation that supports survival. And as soon as the body perceives that there's a danger, then there's a number of automatic unconscious responses that are triggered. Both physiologically and neurologically. One of those is that you have an elevated heart rate and blood pressure, and then a flood of cortisol and adrenaline are triggered. Those things support the systems that your body would need to respond to an active threat or danger, like a saber-toothed tiger, for example. When your body is under threat or danger, your body may need, and certainly in earlier times where we were responding as humans to more active physical threats of danger, your body would need elevated heart rate and blood pressure, blood going to your limbs, your external limbs, to your massive muscles system so that you could fight or fly, to run away. One of the results of those physiological and neurological responses is that your hippocampus is hijacked. Your hippocampus is responsible for your rational and logical thought. And the reason that your hippocampus is hijacked, effectively taken offline, is because it's faster for your body to respond without the hippocampus. Your hippocampus slows down your response. And so in the interest of speed and efficiency, the hippocampus is hijacked, taken offline so that your body can effectively respond in the most primitive limbic system, according to your limbic brain, what we sometimes refer to as your lizard brain, in the most instinctive way without stopping to think through. Because if you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, in taking as much data and thinking through what your pros and cons and your various options are is going to slow you down and decrease your chances of surviving that attack. So your body defaults to those instinctual responses that are held within your limbic brain. And so when you're in a trauma response or a stress response, a person is generally not able to think as rationally or logically or in as organized a fashion as they normally would. We see this pretty clearly in young people when they're having a trauma response, or in humans when you're having a trauma response. Many of us, myself included, have had to be evacuated multiple times in the last 6-7 months for wildfires. My house has been in the first evacuation zone for every wildfire evacuation that we've had here in northern Nevada, Truckee Meadows area the past several months. And as I was watching our friends in Southern California have to evacuate, you have a vicarious trauma response to that as well. Those are normal human reactions that have been hardwired into our systems to support survival. They become problematic when they become chronic because our systems get used to operating not in our normal baseline operating systems, but in those elevated cortisol response systems, and those have all kinds of negative outcomes over the long term. But when that happens, you can often see that in people. I was talking with friends when we had to evacuate the first time with the fire, and I thought I did such a good job packing. I ended up having to stay at my parents' house for 3 days, and talking with a colleague who said that they thought they also did a great job, and many of us got the most important things, our photos and our old hard drives and those kinds of things. Um, and I had told Deputy Peterson, told Megan that I had packed. I remembered to grab 3 dresses. It was a Saturday when we evacuated. I said I grabbed 3 dresses for work, but you're going to have to live with Birkenstocks or tennis shoes because that's what I have for footwear. If I was still not able to get into my house before work. And my colleague that I had talked to said they thought they did the same thing, but when they got to their in-laws' house, they realized they had packed like a drunk person. And that's really what a trauma response can be. Your normal operating response, your normal operating system is offline, and that's okay. That's exactly the way that our body has evolved to support survival. It's protective. We'll talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response. It means our system is in distress. It's been dysregulated. The good news is that we've learned that the brain is remarkably plastic, and it can heal itself. And we can re-regulate that body when we have a trauma response or a stress response. And there are things we can do immediately to try to get our operating system back online. And they've done a lot of cool studies. Monks who are very good at mindfulness. I am very bad at mindfulness, I will tell you that. But very good monks that are very good are well practiced and steeped in mindfulness activities. And they strap electrodes all over their brain and their body. And they've been able to, they can control their heart rates and their brain waves through their breathing and their mindfulness activities. But breathing exercises are actually a very good way to get your system back online because they force your heart rate and your blood pressure to return to normal levels, to stop being elevated and come back down. And then mindfulness activities or other physical activities release neurochemicals that counter those toxic neurochemicals like cortisol and adrenaline. So when you exercise, endorphins are released. When you connect with loved ones, oxytocin is released. When you connect with loved ones or do activities that you enjoy, look at beautiful things, dopamine is released. So you can actually take control over your trauma response by triggering some of those neurochemical and physiological responses that are happening within your body. You can also do preventative things that put your body in a better place in terms of having a healthy baseline operating system. We know these things. They're also evidence-based, things that we get told all the time. This is a do as I say, not as I do reminder. Things like regular physical activity and sleep, eating healthy foods and limiting those unhealthy substances, regular social connections with your friends, your colleagues, your family, your loved ones, your pets. Many of you know, I have a service dog, Sage. She provides services to a lot of people here in the department. She's also paid well in bacon. And spending time in nature. And there's a lot of evidence that says getting out in the sunlight and the effects of vitamin D. Journaling, gratitude practices, and accessing therapy, of course, have all been indicated to have high positive outcomes for managing stress. So just some things that I thought might be helpful reminders for all of us. These are things we know, and oftentimes when we're in an elevated stress and response, as many of us have been living in for some time, by nature of the work that we do, it never hurts to get a little refresh and a reminder that these are things we control. There are sometimes things we don't control, and that is actually the basis of trauma. The number one thing that is trauma inducing for people who've experienced trauma is the sense of powerlessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness. And so you counter trauma by finding where you do have control. And when you can actively claim control and power back into your life through taking these types of steps in the moment and after the fact and preventatively, just like any other machine, a car or an airplane or any other complex machine, where you actively take preventative steps to maintain it, that's where you find your power and your control. And so just hopefully that's a helpful reminder to all of us myself included, that when these kinds of things happen, we already have the tools and the skills that we need. Collectively, we're much stronger. And we've got 203 people on this call. That's a mighty strong team. And when we lean on each other and we remind each other that we have what we need, both individually and collectively, we're going to get through anything like this as life throws it at us. So, soapbox, I'm stepping off of it now. Hopefully that was helpful. And I'll go ahead and open it up to questions or comments or chats. Let me scroll up here into the chat. You bet, Cassie. In terms of the question about districts, other districts still being conservative or spending with spending or freezing. One of the things that came up during the CFO call we had yesterday was, should we freeze on our spending in terms of supplies, for example? As we were looking at pre-draws on requests for reimbursement, a question came up about encumbrances. We chose to prioritize personnel and staff. We're always going to put people first. And what we suggested, what we discussed during the CFO meeting was that if you have non-essential supplies that people could maybe live without for a little bit, it might not be a bad idea to put a pause on those as well, just for the short term. We probably gonna feel a little bit like yo-yos for a minute. But I think it's a good reminder for lots of things that we learned yesterday. Making sure that our house is in order in terms of our accounting system, so that when I had to ask districts for their expenditures to date and their projections, and I needed those by grant and by fiscal year, because our draws are done by job numbers, which requires an assistance listing number, an ALN, formerly referred to as a CFDA number, and a CAN number, which is the fiscal year number. I need to be able to have that number as soon as possible. And so your systems, if your systems are up to date and current, you can get us that as fast as you can. Then also being able to know what you can pause and what you can't pause. I think that's where another place you can find power in challenging times. So I don't know if folks want to put something in the chat, if you've had, and you may not know the answer right now. You may have frozen it, and then about 30 seconds before this meeting, maybe things have changed. And so if you've got any feedback on that, Shirley's got a question, mentioned that we've been working through the kinks of our new financial system, and it sounds like they've been worked through. That is not true. That is indeed fake news. We have not moved through the kinks. Those kinks continue to be identified. They are challenging. It's a massive reboot and a massive upgrade to a massive system statewide. And so we are continuing to work through those. And I appreciate you highlighting that, Shirley. For us, we have a list, a recon list of all the outstanding requests for reimbursement that were submitted prior to the upgrade and since the upgrade. And there were some that were actually submitted for processing the week before the upgrade that appeared to have cleared and did not. And so we are going back and having to investigate those on a payment by payment basis and trying to get those to be corrected. And so we're working through those as quickly as we can, our Office of Fiscal Operations, and we're continuing to provide them as a grants management unit with updated lists on a regular basis, so that we can collectively address those as fast as we can for all of you. And we appreciate your grace and patience in that process. We know it's frustrating. I will also add that if you have any absolute cash flow needs, where you're like, we are not going to make payroll, that's always going to be my number one priority. We want to make sure that people can feed their families. So if you've got those issues, you send an email to us at grantsinfo@doe.nv.gov. That email is going to be on some slides here upcoming, that you get us those lists. Absolutely. Yesterday, one of the other things we talked about with our CFOs was that if you've got any budget revisions that are in any point in the process of being approved, and you need us to stop that. We paused all budget revision reviews and approvals yesterday, except for those that our partners let us know needed to be done quickly, right away, because of the need to get some reimbursements processed. So if you've got any you need us to kick back so that you can reprioritize some of your funding based on maybe trying to be a little bit more conservative, as Cassie mentioned, please let us know. Get us an email to grantsinfo@doe.mv.gov. You'll see that slide again here several times throughout the deck. That's our default email, our universal email for all of our grant related communication. We'll make sure it gets to the right folks. And we've got a list going of those things. Any other questions? Thanks, Deb. You read my mind. Deb is good at that. Unfortunately for Deb. Probably over hazard pay for that. It's not a happy place to be sometimes. All right. We can always come back to this if you've got more things that pop up as we go, but I'd like to move forward. We had some questions that came through on the survey, agenda item requests. So the first one was that if SPPs, which are our school performance plans, so this would be specific to our school districts, charter academies, local education agencies, if they're due in June, how can grant allocations be tied to the school's performance plans? We won't have any idea of what allocations will look like this upcoming year. Do we just use the previous current year's allocation for the schools, even though the plan is for 25-26? I think that the comment right in the middle, we won't have any idea of what allocations will look like this upcoming year, might be the most sage comment of the entire slide deck, pertinent given what we've been going through the last 36 hours or so. But we do have an answer. Last year at the Federal Title Directors meeting in March of 24, we held an open discussion regarding this. And we talked about how we could, what our options are in terms of opening funding applications, any page, given that we don't know what the future federal funding amounts are going to be at that point in the year. And the majority of our LEA partners wanted us to open with the prior year's funding allocations, which would allow you all, our school districts and charter academies, to have a reasonable estimate on how in starting to build your budgets. And that also lets us, as a department, get you to some state of approval and without putting you at risk of what we've commonly referred to as a blackout period. There's no actual true blackout period. What happens if you don't have full approval or at least substantial approval of some type of award for the future federal fiscal year, which starts on October 1st, but which we have 3 months of pre-award funding allowed beginning on July 1st. If you don't have full approval or substantial approval as of July 1st, then any spending that you do between July 1st and the date upon which you receive full approval or substantial approval could be deemed disallowed. And so that's where you run the risk of having, that's where you run the risk financially. And so we don't want to put you at that risk. And so we will start with your current allocations for those entitlement grants that are tied to the school performance plans, as we've agreed to in the past. And then once we receive our grant award notices from USAID, then we update those allocations accordingly. And we're going to continue to monitor the situation. To your point, Megan Short in the chat. We'll continue to monitor the situation. This year's going to be, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know that I want a crystal ball, but I don't have one. And so I wouldn't even wager a guess as to what we would expect to happen between now and July 1st, let alone now and October 1st. when the federal fiscal year is supposed to start. So we will proceed as we plan to proceed, which is to open the entitlement grants and formula grants with the FY25 allocations based on the amounts that we receive from our programmatic offices. The programs teams provide what is called an allocation memo to the grants management unit. We use those memos to upload the amounts into the funding applications in ePage. We're going to proceed as planned until we are until we have a reason to change course. And then if we do have a reason to change course, we'll take the same approach that we took yesterday, where we will respond reasonably and rationally based on the best information we have available at that time. All right. The next question, can we get an updated chart for NDE, GMU, and programmatic so that we know who we are to go directly to for questions regarding different grants? With the recent turnover, it is almost impossible to keep track of who we are to go to for which grants. School districts are required to provide that document for their subrecipient monitoring. Is there one for NDE? It's a great question. We really appreciate the grace and patience you've extended to all of us throughout the department as we continue to experience turnover and vacancies. It's been a lot. As I mentioned a minute ago, the GMU, our grants management unit, hasn't been fully staffed for a very long time. We're going to look at what that looks like in terms of data in a minute. Programmatic contacts you'll have to obtain from the programmatic offices, and you can see the ND grant directory online. I'll make sure that that's hyperlinked before I send you the slides out so that you can see those. It's very difficult for us sometimes to get the information on our websites updated, but you should be able to go to the department's website and be able to see your programmatic contacts and who those are. And at minimum, email the director of the program's office. I've got some org charts that we're going to look at in a minute related to the master grant timeline. So you'll have the names of those programmatic directors, and those are also online. In terms of the fiscal related components of the grants, we can't reiterate this enough. All fiscal related questions for all grant related activities need to include grants info at doe.mv.gov, every single one of them. Whether you're emailing your analyst directly, if you're emailing me directly, we really beg of you to include grants info for a lot of really good reasons. One of these days, I'm going to win the lottery, you guys, and I'm just going to up and move to Costa Rica. It's just going to happen. I bought tickets with the last Powerball. I thought my odds were good. They were not. But we have people that have family emergencies, just like all of you do. We have backup. We have redundancy built in within our structure here within the GMU. But if you're only emailing one person, I can't support you in getting the answer you need and the information you need if that person is out. And if you include grants info, then we have a history with date and time stamps of when you reached out. And we can also make sure that that email makes it to the right people, whether your analyst has taken a promotion to another agency, whether they've had a family emergency and have had to go out on leave, whether they got the COVID or the flu or any number of the other 7 viruses that seem to be going through our communities right now. So if you will please, please, please include grants info on all grant related communication, we'll make sure it gets to the right people, including your programmatic contacts. If you don't know who your programmatic contacts are, we'll get it to the program's director of that office so that they can get it to the right folks on their team. And so that I'll show you the org charts here in a minute. They're in the slide deck, so you'll have that for your record. But for the grants management perspective, please use GMU. All right, next question. Timeline for having NDE approved budgets. We need a system that does not take, I added the not, it was missing, does not take 40 days to get budgets approved. LEAs are recommending 2 weeks or less to get budgets through ePage. Yes, we do. We really do need a system. If you've got additional solutions or ideas for how we can meet that 2-week recommendation, please provide them by emailing grantsinfo@doi.mv.gov. Address book page on ePage. I'll have to look that up for you, Harry. Maybe Deb can respond to that in the chat. There's a question from Harry in the address book page on ePage. Are those programmatic contexts or fiscal contexts? Deb will get you an answer. In terms of our timelines for approval, let me give you a little bit of context, okay? If we look at the number of sub-recipients and sub-awards by fiscal year from FY20 to FY25, you can see the growth year over year, FY20 to FY25. You can see in the light yellow, that's the number of subrecipient organizations. It's also highlighted in the middle row of the data table at the bottom. Subawards are in the darker yellow color. There's a tiny little blue bar there. I don't know if you can see it. It's the top row of the data table, and it says number of GMU staff. And if you can't see that data, I'll read it for you. In FY20, it was 9. In FY21, it was also 9. In FY22, it was 9. FY23, it was 9. In FY24, we bumped up to 10. And in FY25, we finally got 12. So if you look at the numbers across the board, that's static. Each year, that's the growth in number of subrecipients and subawards year over year. The problem is, this is what our grant cycle actually looks like. It cascades. Well, our state fiscal grant cycle is a 12-month grant cycle with a 2-month closeout period in July and August. The state fiscal year starts July and ends in June, and then we close out July and August of the following year. Federal grant cycle is a 27-month cycle. Although for all of them, we have a 4 or 5-month pre-grant review period, which we're starting now. And so when you start to stack those numbers year over year over year over year, and I put those into the same exact bar graph, so look at the y-axis right here, I'm going from 0 to 1800. This y-axis is not changing, but those yellow bars are going from here to here. The blue bars did not change. I still have between 9 and 12 staff between FY20 and FY25. And when I take those counts and I lay them across the cascading grant cycle, this is what it looks like. And when I take the average projected into FY26, where I'm looking at how many subrecipient organizations and how many sub-award agreements the grants management unit is trying to support off a tiny but mighty team on a state fiscal year cycle, that's an average of 75 subrecipient organizations and almost 1,600 sub-award agreements that we're either launching, trying to close out, or actively managing with a tiny but mighty staff of 12 people. That is 10 analysts, 2 supervisors, and currently 2 federal relief contractors. This is state employees only right now. And so you can see this is daunting. And the other challenge with all of this is that while we have these numbers of positions, we've not had them all full. And so when we talk about trying to get those systems in place to get them faster, we've also been tasked with managing a number of other high priority and critical need projects that have primarily impacted my ability to provide my role and perform my role in terms of the grant sub-award budget reviews, specifically in those budget revisions. We really, really try to get the Rev Zeros reviewed thoroughly so that the budget revisions go faster. And one of the challenges we had last year in launching FY25 was that our master grant timeline process was terribly delayed, which really ate into our fall months of September and October. And then in September and October, we were trying to get our late liquidation request submitted to USAID. And so when we got really jammed up with FY25 master grant timeline not getting completed before July 1st, there were real consequences to the workflow and the workload of the grants management unit, and specifically my workflow and my workload that carried forward and impacted my ability to support the budget revisions effectively and the Rev Zero approvals effectively in a way that we prefer. So what I hope you're going to see in the next few slides is that we are in a much better position rolling into FY26 launch. Let's look at 2 slides, and then we will pull up the master grants timeline. We did commit a number of years ago to provide a master grants timeline so that it better supports you in your planning. We know many of you wear multiple hats just like I do. And so when we can try to limit having all of your funding applications due on the same weekend, it's better for you. It's better for us as well. We also try to make sure that you understand all the steps that have to be completed in order for us to get you from your submission to full NDE department approval status. And then it also, of course, supports coordination across the department. If you think about the fact that when I go up to this slide, I've got a massive funnel that happens, right? Where we've got 75 subrecipient organizations that are we have roughly 400 subaward agreements that are going to be new each new fiscal year. If you look across the bottom, on average, the dark black numbers in 450 here, 483, 447, those are being over the entire fiscal year. Not all of those have to be in place by July 1st. So it's a little less than 400 or so on average that we have to get in place by July 1st. Those are both state and federal, by the way. And so we've got a massive volume that goes through 75 organizations, roughly 400 sub-award agreements. We've got roughly 80 EPPs in the department, and then it funnels down to 10 analysts. So those analysts support numerous grants. I'll use our analyst that is assigned to Title 1A, which is our largest sub-award grant that we manage in the agency. Clark County School District sub-award last year, 2 years ago, it was 6,000 line items. And last year we got it down to 2,800 because we've been trying to use the chart of accounts, the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource to get those as skinny as possible. Still 2,800 line items. It still takes a really long time for it to be reviewed. And that review has to happen on the programmatic side. Then it happens on an analyst side, a supervisor side, me, before it can go to Megan for full approval. And we look at every single one of those line items. That's in alignment with our internal controls and the requirements of the Code of Federal Regulations. And that analyst doesn't just support Title 1A. So she's assigned to all 18 of the Title 1A subrecipients, as well as other federal grants. So it becomes a funnel. And so if we don't stagger those, then we've got scheduling and logistical problems. We also committed that we wouldn't take longer to review and approve, to the best of our ability, your subaward agreements than what we gave you to apply for them. So when we can put all those dates down on paper and we look at that, then we can try to plan for that. So previously, in some cases, our subrecipients were submitting an funding application, and we gave you maybe 3 or 4 weeks to submit that in ePage. And then the department might have taken 8, 10, 12 weeks to review and approve it and to provide feedback. The caveat on this is that if there are corrections that are required, then the clock starts over, which is why we work so hard to make sure that you've got all the information we can give you on the front end to make it very clear fundamentally on how your budgets are going to be graded, right? We give you the answers. It's an open book test. when we give you the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource, that is giving you the exact answers for how the grants management unit is going to be grading your budgets. So if you will use that document, you have a much higher chance of getting a passing grade on your first submission of your budget. And that is our goal. The GMU wrote some goals that are included in the state plan for the improvement of pupils, which is the state version of the school performance plan. That our SMART goals are based on a multi-tiered system of support framework. And one of those goals is that we're able to have the vast majority of our sub-recipients submit a budget that's approvable on the first request. And that's tied to the quality of supports that we provide you through these office hours and through the resources that we provide you. We don't control all of that though, because we can't sit with you and do your homework with you when you're preparing those budgets and when you're submitting that assignment. And so our other goal, our second goal, is that when we do provide feedback to you, that we're trying to do so in a way that if you do have to do corrections, you can make those corrections and get all those fixes on the first submission, so that we're not having to go back and forth like we did last year 3 or 4 or 5 times in some cases. So I want you to know we've identified that was a challenge in 25 and that we were going to fix it this coming year. We've already, we started our process this year in December of 24. I sent it's an Excel file that goes to programmatic directors. They fill out the dates for their grants. They send it back to me. I put it into one big, beautiful smart sheet that runs a Gantt chart. If you don't believe me, here you go. It's beautiful. It's also, I think, maybe size 0.3 font. And so you'll be getting the 4-page version and not the 1-page legal size paper version. And then I meet with each programmatic director and their assistant directors as appropriate, so that we can look for anything where, for example, if they gave subrecipients 3 or 4 weeks to submit their budget, but didn't allow the department, if they gave the department more than that same time period to complete our reviews, then we fixed that together. We also looked at the Gantt chart. I have the assigned analysts color coded on the Gantt chart, so that I can make sure that, for example, the analyst that's assigned to Title 1A isn't being asked to do all of her other grant reviews during that same time period. And so, like I said, the goal is to reverse engineer to back into the timeline, so that we can try to get as many, if not all of our grants approved before July 1st in 2025, which we met that goal in the 2 previous years before 2025, FY25. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. If folks have questions, I will open it up quickly while I'm opening up the master grant timeline itself, which was attached to the meeting invite and which was also shared during on Monday night, as I said. Greg, we definitely appreciate all the work everyone up there is doing with such a short staff. We are currently on 70 business days awaiting amendment approval. All right, get me an email, Greg, and let me know. You may have emailed me yesterday. Please keep in mind that when we send back something for corrections, that does impact it. And so if we have to send, thank you. Yep, I did see that then. Thank you. When we do have to send something back for corrections, like I said, that's going to impact the timelines. And so if you can try to use, and we're going to look here, you can see the second tab over here is the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource. If you can look at that document and use that as your open book test for submitting your budgets, that will decrease the amount of time significantly, so that we can do an approval on the first try. All right, I've got the, thanks, Deb. Also, I want to make sure folks know that The funding application contacts in the e-page address book are primarily the grants analysts that are assigned to the various grants. So in response to your question, Harry, they are the fiscal contacts. And again, please make sure that when you do reach out, just use the grants info email and we'll make sure it gets to the right folks, depending on the question that's asked, okay? So one of the things you may notice is that the Master Grants timeline steps themselves, the descriptions here, have been updated. One of the things we heard loud and clear, both from all of you and from our internal colleagues, is that the very square holes that we had differentiated for the steps in the master grant timeline were not fitting any of the round pegs we were trying to fit them into on prior versions of the master grants timeline. So we've updated the names of the steps, and the steps are specific to the type of the grant that it is. So for example, I'm going to scroll. So if you get sick, motion sick, please look away. I'm going to use these two grants here from our Office for Safe and Respectful Learning Environment because they are great examples that are right next to each other. So the bullying prevention grant is a competitive grant. So it's going to have different steps, which require a competitive application first, a review period for that. And then we will open the funding application in e-page. So you'll see that the definitions or the steps here for the bullying prevention grant are called different things than the steps are for the trauma-informed services in schools grant, which is not a competitive application. Those amounts and those subrecipient partners were defined and determined in the application that our colleagues in the Office for Safe and Respectful Learning Environment submitted to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and or USAID. I don't remember with TIFs, which federal agency it was that manages that. But regardless, it is not a competitive application. So these steps below are different than the steps are for a competitive application. Likewise, if there is a plan that has to be reviewed and approved, then such as, let's see, RPDP might not be the best example. Don't get sick. Maybe it will be. If there's a plan that has to be reviewed and approved before we open something in ePage, but it's not really competitive. Okay, here's some good ones. Never mind, I lied. Our RPDP programs and our public broadcasting services grants, that's not competitive, but the subrecipients are required to submit some type of plan that has to be reviewed outside of ePage before we open it in ePage. And so that happens beforehand. So for example, you can see here with the PBS grant, that's going to happen before we open it in ePage, but it's not competitive. So the steps hopefully provide more clear distinction between what's happening at each step along the way, so that it's more clear to all of you all of the steps that have to happen as we go through the process. And Redora, please connect with your director. And yes, the master grant timeline dates have to be reflected in your notice of funding opportunity. All right, so I did send the master grant timeline out Amber lost the connection, just getting back on it so quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience. Can you hear me now? All right, Deb says yes. Let's try again. This is the, and can you see my screen? Yay! Okay, there we go. Teams froze. All right. Uh, but it did rebound pretty quickly, so that's good. Faster than usual too. So what I was saying is that hopefully you had a chance to review the dates um, to the master grants timeline if you've got any concerns on overlapping dates, etc. But I will flag for you that the very first funding application is scheduled to open on February 10th. So we are ready to go. Your FY26 funding applications are not, you can't see them yet, but we can. Your 2026 applications are in ePage, and we are currently refining them. We are updating the federal and state general assurances based on the updates that were made to the Code of Federal Regulations in both 2 CFR and 34 CFR. We're reviewing those right now for compliance with those updates, and then we'll get the language blessed by our deputies, attorney generals. And then we'll get those uploaded in time for the first launch. The state grants are always managed with a clause that says the funding is pending legislative and gubernatorial approval. The ECILP funding is currently within what is called the governor's recommended budget, GO1. If you watch the governor's State of the State address, that's during that time or immediately after that address, the governor's recommended budget is made public. We start working on that budget as state agencies a year before the process begins. And so the ECILP grants are in the master grants timeline because, as I said earlier, we're going to proceed as planned. And you'll notice that the dates that we selected fall right around first committee House passage, which during the 120-day schedule of the legislative session. We figure at that point it's a pretty safe point in the process. Highly popular program and bill, but at any point our assurances do reference that if the funding goes away per Congress or the Nevada legislature, these subawards go away as well. And so we would much rather get upfront in our planning and processes so that we are best positioned to start those programs as early as possible. And then just say that it's all pending legislative and gubernatorial approval. So a bill becomes a law by, if you remember your Schoolhouse Rocks lessons when you were growing up, then that requires both passage by the legislative branch and signature by the executive. The chief executive in the state is the governor. In case you didn't know, I did tell you my undergrad is high school math and science. My master's is social work. My doctoral work is in political science. My research concentrations are public administration and public policy. I am in a current holding pattern. Yes, thank you, Zach. I am in a holding pattern on my dissertation, which is in legislative administrative discretion and delegated authority. So, but this is one of the things that makes me weird and all kinds of fun at dinner parties. So, here is the org chart I promised you from the Department of Education. From the perspective of the Master Grants timeline, you'll see that under my office, I do serve as the director of the Office of District Support Services. I have the grants management unit. I also have the audit unit that I supervise. I make all of the state education fund, the people-centered funding plan payments every month, and I make the special education fund payments. My office is also responsible for all of the state and federal school finance reporting. So while I support the grants management unit, that is not the only thing that's on my plate, as we talked about earlier. Our programs offices sit within our other division, other two divisions, and there are 8 of them. All of them, other than the assessment, Office of Assessments, Data and Accountability Management, provide programmatic lead work on the grants that we pass through to all of you. Within the Student Investment Division, the Office of Division Compliance supports our pre-award assessments and our financial subrecipient monitoring. In terms of the master grant timeline, those pre-award assessments, you'll see that they play a role. And again, as I mentioned, this org chart has been updated and is current as of right now. So within NDE, there are 2 lanes that we have very clear distinction on in terms of who does what for review and approval of subawards. Our programs offices review for allowability, and they provide what's called programmatic approval. Our grants management unit within the Student Investment Division reviews for accounting coding. So that's where that budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource comes in. And we provide that fiscal and budgetary approval. The Office of Division Compliance performs that pre-award assessment. Sometimes we talk about that as the PAA. That is required. We are not allowed to sign a subaward agreement by federal regulation without having completed that PAA. So that's an absolutely critical and vital step, which is why it's called out specifically and explicitly within the master grant timeline itself. And then our Office of Fiscal Operations, as you can see up here, as another office within the Student Investment Division, they're the ones that are responsible for processing your request for reimbursement payments, in addition to a lot of other things that they do. The budget, subaward budgets are approved in these basic steps. You submit your budget, our programs team reviews for allowability, the GMU reviews for accounting, fiscal elements, and for math. We try very hard for steps 2 and 3 to happen simultaneous. We talk about that as simultaneous review. But it can, your budget can get kicked back for corrections at any point in time. And the reason we try for simultaneous review is so that your budget, if it's going to get kicked back for corrections, that happens one time and one time only, ideally. As I said, use your textbook, use the manual for your open book test for the stuff that the GMU is going to be looking at, so that to your best of your ability and all the parts that you control, your coding is in alignment with what we're going to be grading you on, and that your math is mathing, for lack of a better word. And that if you put math in the narrative description, which it's going to say all over that manual, that textbook, don't put the math in the description unless you absolutely have to. If you do, that math better math. Otherwise, we're going to have to kick it back. Okay, so follow the instructions. They're there for a reason. At the GMU level, there are 3 levels of review that have to happen, and those are in alignment with best practices for all fiscal related activities. So it's an analyst that reviews it at the first level, their supervisor reviews it, I review it, and if we need to send it back for corrections for any of the above, we're going to do it. And like I said earlier, we're going to lean in very heavily on Rev Zeros. Those are your original subaward budgets, because we have committed to you that we will not ask you to make corrections on anything we've allowed you to move forward on in the past, in a prior revision. We allowed people to do that during FY24. We said, you can make this correction on your next revision. And then people broke their trust with us. They didn't honor those commitments, and they said, sure, we'll make those corrections. And then they didn't. And so for audit purposes, we have to have you make those corrections on Rev Zero. If you can get it right on Rev Zero, then it decreases the chances that you're going to have corrections on your subsequent revisions. And it makes our review, my review of your Rev 0, Rev 1, 2, 3, 4, much more quick. Final approval at Rev 0 has to be done by Deputy Superintendent Peterson, with exception on a case-by-case basis as needed if, for example, if she were to become sick or be out of the country or something like that. Okay. I can do department approval for all other subsequent revisions. As a reminder, all of the steps that are within the yellow box happen within the student investment division. And as I referenced earlier, we are a tiny but mighty team. All right. Any other questions or feedback on the master grant timeline? We're almost there, you guys. We got 10 more minutes. We're doing remarkably well. Content heavy. I've only lost 22 people too. That's pretty amazing. I mean, I guess I did lose myself at some point. So that's got to count for something. All right. When I first took this role almost 3 years ago, I would take the budgets home. This was pre-downloading from ePage into Excel. And you know your girl loves a good spreadsheet. I actually have this little placard that says, ooh, this calls for a spreadsheet. That's how much I love the spreadsheets. I would take these budgets home and I would read them in bed, and I would come home and I would come back to work and I would say, why did we do this in this budget, but this in this budget? And we didn't have good answers. And my undergrad being in education, I said that we're probably not providing good instructions to our class. We're not giving a good rubric to our class. And so let's write some things down. And so we wrote the very first budget preparation guidelines document, and we published that for FY23. And we've refined it. And then we published a chart of accounts supplemental resource to try to help get people more in line with what it meant to use the department's chart of accounts, which is required in statute. Okay. And so we've refined those year over year. Last year, we took those two documents and we combined them into one, which is the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource. We've also published a standard set of object codes for ePage and function codes for ePage. And then we aligned the paper template, the Excel template for our paper-based subawards, which we are getting further and further away from each year to try to get as many of our grants into ePage as possible. And they're aligned with the same object codes and function codes. So we've been making those enhancements. One of the goals, as I mentioned earlier, to the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource was to, number one, like I said, to make sure people had good instructions, good information on how to submit a budget that was going to be successful the first try. What are we going to grade you on? Get it to you very clearly so you know exactly how to be successful. Like I said, it's an open book test. Number two, to standardize it, because by the time we take all of your information and we have to put it into an F33 report, an NPEPS report, the NRS 387, 388A report, we have data that where the variables are commonly defined, meaning that they are all standardized. So that when we say we're looking at object code 330 professional development, all of you are coding your expenditures in the same way. And then when we look at function code 2213 for object code 330, we're only talking about licensed classroom teachers, right? And so that's been the goal of the budget preparation guidelines chart of accounts supplemental resource, twofold: standardizing so that we have meaningful reports, and then aligning and giving you guys good information so that you know what the expectations are. It's been remarkable. You guys have done such a good job with your budgets. And if you will continue to use that tool, then we will continue to be able to support you in submitting approvable budgets. Where we see errors is when people forget that that tool is available, or when they go back to what they did last year. We will continue to refine this tool year over year. And to try to make sure that it makes sense. We will always have things. There was one year where a school district had an internet domain registration fee. And we were like, we've never had to do that. Where would we code that? And so we had a norm on that. We included that in the next version. I'll let you know that I'm on the review committee for the newest version of the National Center for Education Statistics Handbook. The current version is 2014. I have the latest version of the updated version, which will be the 2025 version. Comments are due back by February 7th. So I anticipate we'll have a new version soon. I cannot share it. It's embargoed. There are very few changes other than to update the information in line with GASB pronouncements, Government Accounting Standards Board. Very few changes in the coding, but we will reconvene a chart of accounts working group as we have said we would. We've committed to our CFOs that we would look at that again so that we can continue to align and refine those codes in a way that every one of our subrecipients is actively using, not passively using a trial balance to crosswalk, but actively using the chart of accounts in the way that it is required to be used in the statute. So I did provide the budget preparation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource. Deb, can you give me a thumbs up? I just switched. Do you see the chart of accounts supplemental resource? Yeah. Okay, because I'm afraid to unshare and reshare because I think I might get kicked out again. Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate that validation as well. So this is the current version. It's noted up here in brick red that it's the FY25 version. Are there any questions? Hot burning topics? No one sent any email saying you've got this type of purchase in the wrong place. Anything that's bothering people about coding of types of purchases within the chart of accounts portion, object codes, function codes. Are we good to go? I will note if you've not read, I think it's fascinating reading, things, and this is hyperlinked, which is why it just jumped like that. There's an introduction. Why we have it. There's general instructions. And this is where it says, whenever math is included in the budget narrative, it must be accurate. The math has to math. I might put a little blurb and says, the math isn't mathing. The best budget narrative includes all best budget narratives include all of the necessary information, including required information that is specific to a certain object or function code, and no additional unnecessary information. Fundamentally, I need to know enough in the narrative description for why you picked the object code and the function code. Okay. Yes, the one online is dated 1/26/24 because that's the FY25 version. That's what we're looking at right now. We'll update it for FY26 pending today's discussion. Thank you, Kayla. So if we have any feedback, anything I need to update, this is your time. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Yep. And so if you've not read this, these are a couple short pages about the reason we have the document, how the chart of accounts has to be used. And then at the little quick table on the coding within the chart of accounts and general instructions on the type of accounts, the type of coding. Fundamentally, what type of expenditure is it? That's where you select the object code. What is the purpose of the expenditure? That's the function code. And there's some examples. All right. At the very end of the document last year, we provided 2 pages of some explanations on function codes and how to understand how to use the function codes. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to go back to my slide deck. Hopefully. Did I do it, Deb? Yeah, look at that. Okay. Any questions on the chart of accounts or the budget appropriation guidelines and chart of accounts supplemental resource? The function and object code Excel sheet and the new chart of accounts that was most recently updated in October of last year should be on there. We keep trying to get it posted. I will make sure that when I send out the FY26 version of this document, I include the current version of the chart of accounts as well. One of the challenges with the website is ADA complying it. When it comes from an Excel sheet, it can be difficult to do that. We want to make sure that it's compliant, of course, but I did update the formatting to yes, the changes that need to be happening for equipment in accordance with the updates to 2 CFR, also known as UG, Uniform Grant Guidance, yes, will be incorporated. All right, going to take us home. Reminder, requests for reimbursement are due on the 21st of each month. If you have quarterly approval, that's also due on the 21st of each month. You are required to submit a $0 RFR. If you did not expend funding that month, great, that's fine. You just need to tell us that you didn't expend funding that month, so we know that you're not just getting behind. But if you can, you need to do that in ePage, and that has been in place for almost 3 years now, the ability to do so. The grants management utilizes our universal email account. All grant-related inquiries need to include grants info. Please and thank you. That's our very best option to be able to support you. RFRs for paper need to be sent to grants info or included on grants info. We've had people submit their paper-based RFR just to their programmatic person. And then months go by and people say, where's our payment? And we say, what are you talking about? We don't know what you're talking about because it went to a person that's no longer with the department, or they missed it, or it got buried in an inbox and we don't know it exists. And so we would like to be able to support you and make sure you're getting the funding that you need. In order to do so, though, we need you to include grants info at doe.mv.gov. We hold these quarterly subrecipient meetings. Look at that. We're already planning through the end of 2025, manifesting that we will continue to have these meetings because we will continue to have funding. I'm sure of it. I will give you those surveys 3 weeks before the meeting so that you can tell us what you need to hear. So far in the past, we've had these office hours on some of these topics, subawards as legal documents, use of the chart of accounts, etc. We will hold one on the updated grant assurances so that we can make sure that we flag the changes to the 2 CFR, Uniform Grant Guidance, as well as 34 CFR, otherwise known as EDGAR. Sometimes we talk about EDGAR as my boyfriend because I spent so much time with him, but it's really the Education Department's General Administrative Regulations. And so we'll hold one of those as well. We're working on getting these on our website as well. Background work, right, as it were. If you have additional questions or topics that you would like us to cover in an office hour, shoot us an email at grantsinfo@doe.mv.gov. That's grantsinfo@doe.mv.gov. And so make sure that you get us those requests. I will look at your question here just 1 second, Meredith. Again, how many times can I put the email address on slides? Maybe 7. I'm going to leave this slide up here, and I'll continue to take questions in the chat. Thank you for the extra 4 minutes that you gave us today. If you don't mind clicking on the link, yep, I will, Christina. We've already been in communication with your SBCSA leadership about it, and I will be giving them a response as I promised to as soon as we have all the information from our ePage request forms. So thank you for flagging that. For the rest of you, there's a link that will be embedded in the slide deck. You can also take your little phone and point the camera at the QR code right now. It should take you no more than maybe 90 seconds to complete our feedback form. We very much appreciate it when you do so. It helps us try to improve our materials that we provide to you. And remember, that's one of our SMART goals. So if you can help us, help you, we would love to do so. Meredith's question about the master grant timeline, FY26 new and FY26 continued. The continued option for number one is for seats. Seats are priorities. So if you had seats under opportunity number one, it means that it is a streamlined application that will be provided, but pending funding availability. That will allow us to get those seats prioritized and the funding prioritized. And then opportunity number two has to be reapplied for every year because the projects should be completed within the biennium according to the enabling appropriation and legislation. And so opportunity two is a new grant application each new biennium. And so in the master grants timeline, you'll see FY26 new opportunity number one will have anyone that had continued funding for seats has a separate process. Opportunity number one, new funding for seats. And then opportunity number two has new funding applications only. There's not a continued funding for opportunity number two. Hopefully that answered your question, Meredith, but that's based on the enabling legislation. And again, as you noted, assuming it's renewed, and that's always pending. Okay, cool. That's always pending legislative and gubernatorial approval, of course. I'll sit here for a second. Have a fantastic rest of your day and week. We appreciate all that you do to support the kids and families and educators of this state as always. We can't do it alone and we all need each other. So please please take care of each other, be kind, be patient. So thanks and have a fantastic rest of your day. Paula, if you'd like to ask a question, you can take yourself off mute or you can put it in the chat. I'll stay here. Paula, if you're talking, I cannot hear you. You'll have to click that little microphone icon on the top corner of your toolbar.
Hey, Amber, can
There
you hear
you
me?
go. Yes, now
Sorry
I can.
about that. That was an accident.
No worries. You're fine.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Nicole, you've got your hand up. Jacobs, if you're talking. Okay, now I can see you're unmuted. If you're talking, Nicole, I can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My computer doesn't love Teams all the time.
Same,
Yeah,
mine
but-
doesn't either, apparently.
A couple of us from the CTSO world really enjoyed what you talked about earlier in the presentation. And I was just wondering if I could have your personal email to reach out to you about maybe coming to do a workshop for some of our students at conferences. Or if the grants email is the best one, I can do that too.
Yeah, just shoot to grants info and Nancy will get it to me.
Okay, I'll shoot you some dates that are coming up in the spring. I don't know how much you're allowed or can get out of the office, but we'd love to have you.
I would love, they have a short string. So it's funny, when I took this role, I have my dog with me, right? So I obviously have a little child safety gate. She doesn't have thumbs, so we don't have it very tight, my dog. But we were joking that like now the department's got gates to keep people in their offices. We will absolutely look at the schedule. I'll connect with Deputy Peterson. And we're obviously going into legislative session, but absolutely love to. Oh man, I miss being in a building with students. So,
and I'm sure the students would love to see your service dog too. So
we had
the Reno Fire Department brought their arson dog out last year, and it was a hit. So
yeah, she's way more popular than I am. So yeah,
awesome.
Please send an email.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You bet. You too.
I don't see any more.
Yep. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.